welcome to the OnStage Colorado Podcast. I'm Toni Tresca, and I'm joined today by Alex Miller, editor and publisher of OnStage Colorado.
Yeah, what a surprise to have me on here, huh?
I know, it's a shocking reveal.
Yeah, so in this episode, as usual, we'll take a look at the shows we've seen lately and give our piece about whether you should check them out or not. And then our main topic this week is theater myths and traditions. So we'll get to that in just a little bit, but I thought it was a fun topic, and it was prompted by a story I saw in the New York Times. So.
Yeah, that's right. We'll be talking all about why you shouldn't say Macbeth or whistle in a theater, ghost lights, and following up on our conversation that we had with Jeffrey Parker on October 15th about the origins of Break a Leg. So Stick around for all that and more.
Yep. Yeah, it's a fun conversation. And then later in the interview, I have an interview that I did with Kate Hertz from Springs Ensemble Theatre. They are doing the Thanksgiving play down there, and I thought it would be fun to talk to them, those folks, about something that kind of had a little bit of a seasonal vibe to it. So that's a fun conversation with her, and we'll get to that a little bit later in the pod.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the rare shows that actually fits the Thanksgiving time period. You and I were talking about doing a Thanksgiving episode, but there's just not that much Thanksgiving programming, particularly in the theater space. So we are thankful to Springs Ensemble Theatre for programming the Thanksgiving play so that we can talk about it.
Yep, absolutely.
But first, on to our weekly roundup of what we've seen around the state. So, Alex, why don't we start with you? What have you seen this week?
Well, I had a little bit of a light weekend. I was supposed to go see Gutenberg the musical on Friday night, but they had a replacement, so they asked if I would wait until this week or something. But I did get out and see Confederates opening night at Curious Theater. So this is a play by Dominique Morisseau, and it's an interesting concept. So it's basically about a Black woman who's a college professor, and it runs sort of parallel to a story of another Black woman back in like sort of the Confederate era South, and there's this sort of comparison between the treatment of these two women in such different circumstances, and it's got a great cast, but it relies very heavily on, I think, the audience's understanding or appreciation for how those two stories connect. And I wasn't quite sure it succeeded on that level. They were cool stories, and there's definitely some things you can see, but others that I'm just like, man, I just don't know how strong that was. But great show. Acting wise, it was directed by Marissa Hebert. I'd recommend it, but yeah, it's a curious show. There's definitely some lines to make white people squirm throughout. But also the playwright turns her gaze to how Black people treat each other too. And so there's definitely some interesting social commentary in there, and racial dimensions of it that are pretty intriguing.
Okay, interesting. You've definitely got me, pun not intended, but accidentally, curious about seeing that show. I'll be checking that one out this Friday, so I guess you and I can touch base again on that show next week.
All right. Well, you did get out to the Gutenberg the musical, so this is the show at the Garner Gallery at the Denver Center that's playing all the way through May. So should we go see it?
That's right. I would say you should go see it if you kind of are already in the musical theater camp. It's very much playing in those tropes. The book is not my favorite, if I'm going to be totally honest with you. It's kind of a little bit thin. It's going through these two producers who are pitching a musical about Gutenberg, who invented the printing press. However, they've done no research, and so they're making it all up as it goes along, which is funny at times, but it kind of the joke wears a little bit thin. And I saw it on Friday night, this was the Blizzard night in Denver. Yeah. And like you mentioned, there was an alternate on, so I didn't see who was actually supposed to be in the role of Bud. I saw Brett Ambler go on instead, who is the understudy for both parts. So I guess I don't have a total. I can't really weigh in on the actual leads in it, but the two were okay together. I didn't feel that they had quite the chemistry necessary to prop up the book, but I'll be curious to hear what you think when you do get to check out Gutenberg with hopefully the two actors who are supposed to be there.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's we've talked about this before. The Denver Center takes kind of a big gamble to put a show in for that long, and they kind of can be hit or miss in that Garner Galleria space. I've definitely seen some dogs there over the years, but also some great stuff. So this sounds like
Yeah,
this one landed in the middle.
I would definitely say it kind of comes down in the middle. It's not that I didn't have a good time and there weren't some jokes that did work, and there's some really clever choreography in particular by Piper Lindsay Arpan, who is the assistant director and choreographer along with director Rodney Liscano. There's some really good dance bits in there, and there's some really funny gags, particularly with the hats, because they're playing all the characters, and so they're constantly switching hats that have the name of the character they're playing on it.
Uh-huh.
And there's some really funny visual gags that come out of that. But I just was left wanting a little bit more from like a storytelling perspective.
Okay. All right. What else? You were out on the festival scene.
I was attending the inaugural Immersive Invitational, which is hosted by Denver Immersive, and I was actually one of the 5 judges for this event.
Cool.
So this event is it's the first time it's ever been hosted, and it's a 48-hour new work project. So these 8 teams got together, and in 48 hours they drew a topic, they drew a prop, and they were assigned a room in this really beautiful historical building. I'm blanking on the name. I was just there. It was amazing. El Javel. So it's kind of near 16th Street Mall. It's a beautiful historic old building. It's owned or operated by Non Plus Ultra, and just an absolutely iconic space. But these 8 teams were kind of tasked with creating a new immersive work in these 48 hours. It had to be 12 minutes, had to be immersive, and then the audience was taken on this tour around the building. Essentially, the kind of theme of the evening was after hours at the Mat, which was the Museum of Auspicious Traditions, which is kind of fitting for our episode today. And the pieces were really inventive. It was really cool debriefing with the judges, which included Cody Burst, who is in charge of the creative technology at Meow Wolf, Daniela Ria, who is the No Proscenium correspondent for Denver, Mia Fiorelli, who is from the Without Walls Festival and La Jolla Playhouse, and David Thomas, who is one of the founders of Immersive Denver and a professor here in Denver. We had, in our conversation, one of the things that kept coming up was how different each of these pieces were and how everybody took immersive in a totally different direction, which is something we talked about in our immersive episode of the podcast a few weeks ago.
Wow. That sounds like a lot of fun. And who was the winner, or was there a winner, or you just kind of judge them?
There was winners. So we had the first runner-up was the Catamounts for their production of A Secret Meeting of an Unofficial Chapter of the Society of the Ancient Arabic Order of the Nobles of the Mystic Shrine, 1910.
Holy shit!
Yeah, I was like, no, we didn't give the award just because they had the longest title. That just did happen. They did have the longest title. And this was kind of a piece set in 1910 of the meeting of the Shriners Society. And they're talking about how women have not been able to become full members. And it's a time-traveling piece where we're visiting them from the future. And kind of the conceit of the piece was them just kind of being like, oh, surely you guys have elected a female leader for your country by this point in time. So, and obviously we had to then inform them, no, we have not elected a female leader. And so it was very political, but very funny. The cast had really great chemistry together. And then our grand prize winner was this piece called Call Waiting, designed in collaboration by the Opia House and 2 Cent Lion Theater Company. And it was this really impressive, immersive experience about this group of friends who was searching for one of their friends who has gone missing. And so they're trying to do a seance to get this telephone to activate, and so you have to play these kind of mini games in the room to get the phone to call. And it was this really touching, sweet piece. It definitely had the most developed story of any of the performances that we saw. But overall, it was all 8 teams did a really impressive job, and it was just such a pleasure getting to judge the competition.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that sounds great. And then you were also out at the film festival. How much did you get to see? It sounds like you were pretty busy at the Immersive Invitational.
I was. That was pretty. So I was at the Immersive Invitational yesterday from about 3:30 till about 10:30. So a little bit of a full day affair for me over there. But yeah, I also had some time to catch a couple more films at the 47th Annual Denver Film Festival. I think the highlight for me was this 3.5 hour epic called The Brutalist that was being shown on 35mm film at the C Film Center. It's this really powerful piece about an immigrant's journey to America and him kind of like realizing maybe the American dream isn't all it's cracked up to be, which is just a very fitting message, and I wonder how this film played pre-election. I imagine it was still very powerful, but post-election of Trump, it just hits really differently.
Yeah. Yeah. More into the American nightmare phase of our history, I think.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
All right. Well, that's it for stuff we've seen this week. Any bit of news lately, Tony, for our mailbag section? Or
one quick bit of news from down in Southwest Colorado. Creed recently announced its summer festival lineup. So this is the first season that was being put together by Emily Van Fleet over there as their new leader. And she and the team over there have selected Xanadu, The 39 Steps, The Fantastics, Silent Sky, Boomtown Improv Comedy, a concert celebrating 60 years of Creed rep, and the Denim and Diamond Jubilee fundraiser as being a part of its 60th season.
60th season. Yeah. What a program, a storied program, as it were. So I'm familiar with all those shows except for Silent Sky. Do you know what that one is?
It's a Lauren Gunderson piece. And it's actually one of her better works, I would say. It's kind of about this longtime listeners of the pod know that Alex and I maybe are not the biggest Lauren Gunderson fan, but it's a really touching piece about this female astronomer who is making gains at a time when that was not super prominent or accepted. And I've seen the show a couple times. It's very sweet, very charming. It makes perfect sense to be produced in rep with these kind of other shows, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I love those stories, and they've really been coming out a lot in recent years about women who made these enormous contributions in science, but they were either ignored or their findings were attributed to the guy they were working for. And so I think there's a lot of those out there, and definitely been hearing some of them. All right. Well, let's move on to our main topic, myths and traditions in theater. I ripped this off shamelessly from a story I saw in the New York Times Style section, which was about that. And they had some myths and traditions. They were also talking about some stuff that I don't think we'll get into about like such and such actor gives everybody, this or that. Like, I think it was Hugh Jackman gave out lottery tickets on opening night and stuff like that. So, but we're going to focus more on the, whistling and, don't say the Macbeth and things like that. So do you want to kick it off with some of those practical traditions that we hear about in the theater?
Sure. So yeah, well, I guess we can start with the aforementioned no whistling inside the theaters. So this originated from sailor stagehands who used whistle commands, and they would cue each other by whistling. And so an actor who whistled backstage might accidentally cue a stagehand to lift or drop scenery, which would potentially put an unaware performer at risk of being crushed.
Yeah.
So the best way to make sure that you do not become a theater ghost was to refrain from whistling altogether. And this rule has kind of stuck around and become a bit of a superstition within the theater community.
I love that. I love that there were sailors that they would bring into the theater because they knew the ropes, literally.
Literally.
Yeah. Cool. There's another one that I think a lot of people are familiar with, the Ghost Light. What's this one about?
Ghostlight is perhaps one of my personal favorite of the theater traditions. Yeah. It's kind of It's a single bulb that is left center stage after hours. And the official purpose is that this is for safety, to ensure that the theater is not so dark that when somebody has to come in, they stumble around and whatnot. But the real reason is to ward off or appease the theater spirits who haunt your theater. Because as any longtime theater person knows and will tell you, all theaters are haunted. That's just a fact.
Yeah. There is something creepy about an empty theater, because most of us, or especially on the audience side, only experience a theater when it's full of life and stuff going on. But to going in there, at night when there's nobody there and like all the empty seats, and you can kind of feel that haunty vibe.
Totally, yeah. And another kind of one in this big tent of theater traditions that you may have heard of, and we talked about on the podcast with Jeffrey Parker, was the origins of break a leg. So instead of saying good luck, actors, technicians, and folks will say to each other, break a leg before the show. But where did this idea come from? There's a couple of theories. Potentially came from the stomping of chairs. In the old days, you wanted to make the audience break a leg of the chair.
Yeah, they were clapping with their chairs so hard they break legs. That was the one that I came across randomly, but I didn't see it pop up in any of these other places, so who knows?
Yeah, so there's some other theories. Some theater folks believe that there are mischief-making spirits, such as me, as I just said. I definitely think all theaters are haunted. And so they would use their magic to force the opposite of what you wish to happen. So if you were to say good luck, these spirits in the theater would make sure that you have terrible luck. So by saying break a leg, you're going to do the opposite. Maybe you won't break a leg. Another theory comes from the idea that it doesn't refer to the actor's leg. We talked about this one with Jeff, but it's actually the theater curtains themselves that you mask backstage with. They're known as legs. And so breaking of the legs is kind of that crossing from behind the curtain. Or another kind of alternative theory is you want the audience to be applauding so much that you have to break the leg of the curtain again to do an encore and give them what they want. So a couple of different theories for the origin of break a leg.
Yeah, another one they had in here was it's Saturday night on Broadway announcement before shows to remind actors that the work week is ending, which, some of the stuff they had in the Time story was very kind of Broadway centric that we wouldn't necessarily see here, but I thought that was an interesting one. And then there's a whole bunch of opening night traditions, so not necessarily myths, but they'll I remember just from doing little community theater shows, there would always, a lot of times the director would give out some little tchotchke or, have everybody sign the poster or, apparently in London, there's a cast and crews like to bang on the windows that are facing the National Theatre's courtyard, which is kind of interesting. And then there's something called the Badelli cake served with punch at Theatre Royal every January 6th since 1795. So another January 6th story there. So there's, I think, probably every theater or every cast, has some sort of little thing that they do that just kind of marks the occasion, I guess, of opening night.
Mm-hmm. Another kind of tradition for Broadway for their kind of one of their opening night traditions is the legacy robe. This was formerly the gypsy robe, but this is a tradition. It's given to the ensemble member within the show that has the most Broadway chorus credits. So the recipient must circle stage counterclockwise 3 times, while wearing the robe. Then let all of I think that's kind of important there. Let the cast members touch the robe for good luck, and then visit all of the dressing rooms to bless the productions. And then each show will kind of add their own decorated panel, their own kind of patch to this robe. It's a really, really storied looking object that just has all of these different pieces from various Broadway shows that have happened. And if you've never seen this tradition kind of enacted, the circling of it, go to BroadwayWorld.com or just search the Legacy Robe Tradition Broadway, and you can find videos of the chorus member with the most experience kind of actually enacting this.
That's fantastic. I love that. I love stuff like that. So moving into some of those more superstitions, there's the biggie is to never say Macbeth when you're in the theater. So you might hear actors refer to it as the Scottish play. And a lot of people don't even know why that is, but there's definitely some theories that it's obviously it's superstition that'll bring bad luck or disaster to the production, and people call it the curse of Macbeth. And there's some, I guess, empirical data about why this might be true. What are some of those?
So I guess we can start with the OG event that kind of set the stage for this curse. In 1606, the actor who was supposed to play Lady Macbeth died suddenly on the opening night of the production, which forced William Shakespeare to step in his place.
That's
so
amazing.
from the start, this production has all kind of been a little bit cursed, which is very fitting for a show about prophecies and fulfilling and kind of the curse of Macbeth.
Yeah, I bet back in those days, people dying before or during the run of a show is a lot more common because all the plagues and stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
But anyhow, this actor who was supposed to play Lady Macbeth dying kind of kicked this tradition off. And then in 1849, there was the Astor Place riot in New York City that was caused by dueling productions of Macbeth that were taking place at the time. So another kind of a spooky event from the Macbeth performance.
Yeah.
In 1937, Laurence Olivier was nearly hit by a falling stage weight during a performance at the Old Vic of Macbeth. I wonder if this was because old Lawrence was whistling, perhaps.
Maybe, yeah.
And then in 1947, actor Harold Norman died after a stage battle became too realistic while he was playing Macbeth, which, I mean, what a way to go.
Yeah. That's a barn burner if you actually get killed for reals on stage playing Macbeth. So, fortunately, there are some cures for the Scottish play. If someone says Macbeth, ideally they would be forced to exit the theater, turn 3 times, spit over their left shoulder, swear, say a Shakespeare line, and then knock to re-enter, and then they will be absolved. And then I also found that some say that if you recite any line from Two Gentlemen of Verona is one way out of the mess, and some will tell you that reciting this line from A Midsummer Night's Dream will do the trick. If we shadows have offended, think but this, and all is mended, that you have but slumbered here, whilst these visions did appear. Just in case, you actually say it, that those are the rules that you have to follow. So it's funny because I didn't really know all of that spinning and spitting, swearing stuff, but I just happen to actually be reading this novel called Showmance by Chad Begwillen, and it's about a musical playwright whose Broadway debut flops so bad that it closes after opening night, and he retreats to his home in Illinois to lick his wounds and finds the community theater he grew up with is mounting a production of the failed musical, and one of these inexperienced actors had said Macbeth, and so they made him do that. But just a quick book recommendation. So this is a new book. Chad, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing his name right, Begwillen, is a 6-time Toni nominee. He wrote the book for Disney's Aladdin. He wrote the book for The Prom, Wedding Singer, and a bunch of shows. And so it's kind of a fun book with a lot of backstage stuff and humor with a nice love story in the middle. So.
Yeah, I was about to ask, is it kind of romancy? The title Showmance kind of makes it seem like there's got to be at least some kind of romantic angle to it.
Yeah, there is. Yeah, it definitely be if you're a gay guy, you definitely really like it because it's got this really kind of heartwarming story about the playwright and this sort of guy that he knew from high school who thought he hated, but turns out to be the best guy in the world. So anyway, that's Showmance. So what else, Toni?
So a couple more. So a kind of a truism within the theater community is that if you have a bad dress rehearsal, it means that the opening night of the show will be a hit. So you kind of want everything to go wrong in the rehearsal room so that then when you put it in front of the audience, they don't see any of those mistakes.
Yeah, I don't know about that one. I mean, obviously, yeah, you definitely want any of that stuff to happen during the dress rehearsal, but I can't imagine that I would be, as a director, I think you'd be pretty alarmed if your dress rehearsal was a disaster the night before opening.
Yeah, I got to agree with you on this one. I don't think this one is necessarily true, even if it is a truism that gets repeated a lot. I think there are tons of directors who are able to have a very effective rehearsal process and then go into the shows without any problems. But, so this is something that helps maybe those shows that are not firing on all cylinders
Right.
get to the finish line.
Okay. And there's some more weird little items to touch on. What are some of those?
Yeah, so there is this kind of superstition that you should never light a trio of candles inside a theater, which I think that makes sense from a fire safety perspective. But I don't know if it probably won't be the death of you if you light a couple candles inside the theater. Another one is never bring a peacock feather on stage. Even though they're beautiful, the actor is never supposed to carry them because this superstition is inspired by the pattern on the feather that to many look like the evil eye. So no production wants to risk offending an audience with an evil curse that's supposed to bring misfortune or injury to anybody who looks at this evil eye. So
Okay.
I had never heard that one before until this, but I guess maybe that explains why we don't see more peacock theme shows.
Yeah. This next one actually sounds fairly practical about mirrors. What's this one?
So mirrors on stage are bad luck, and it's not necessarily because of the fear of mirror breaking or that mirrors are a gateway for evil spirits. It's actually because mirrors are considered bad luck because they reflect light, which is tricky to place on stage without wreaking havoc on the lighting design of the production. Of course, a smart lighting designer can make that work, but if it hits wrong, you can blind the actors or the audience with the light from that mirror.
Yeah. I mean, come to think of it, I can't think of seeing many mirrors on stage. So it does make a lot of sense.
I remember reading about the original production of Cabaret having a large mirror on the stage. But yeah, actually, that's a good point. I can't think of a lot of other shows that use mirrors.
Yeah. And then there's one last one about flowers.
Yes, so you should never give a performer flowers before a show. While giving a performer flowers is one of the greatest traditions of theaters, it is a taboo to give them the flowers before the show because you don't want to give them their kudos before they've actually done the work to earn the flowers.
No, thank you in advance.
Yeah,
with flowers.
You want to make sure that the actors deliver on their performance. You don't want to be giving flowers to a shitty performance.
Yeah, it's like this whole tipping thing. It's like, I'm only going to tip you if you did something great, right? So, all right. Well, I think that's most of the ones that we hit. Were there any more that you can think of?
No more that I can think of off the top of my head. But listeners, if there are any other theater traditions or superstitions that you hold near and dear to your heart, please reach out to us. Let us know. We would love to hear from you, and we will share them on next week's episode of the podcast.
Great.
All right, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, our top 10 Colorado headliners, plus a conversation with Kate Hertz from SET.
Support for OnStage Colorado comes from the Boulder Ensemble Theatre Company, Betsy, whose production of Little Women by Louisa May Alcott plays at the Dairy Center in Boulder December 5th through 29th. This stage adaptation of one of the most beloved classics of American literature is adapted and directed by Jessica Robb Lee. Spend some time this holiday season with the March family. Tickets at betc.org. OnStage Colorado is grateful for support from the Colorado Fine Arts Center at Colorado College, presenting The City Dog and the Prairie Dog from November 2nd through 24th. It's a bilingual musical about exploring the world, learning new things, and maybe, just maybe, coming home again. The FAC also presents Disney's The Little Mermaid from November 20th through December 29th. Two great shows for the holiday season with tickets at fac.coloradocollege.edu. All right, we're back and ready to hit this week's Colorado headliner. So these are some of the upcoming shows in the next week or so that we thought you might want to know about in no particular order. Do you want to kick it off, Tony?
Sure. So I will kick us off with a show that's taking place in Durango, Colorado. It is Behind Me is Silence. This is taking place at the Community Concert Hall at Fort Lewis College, and it's described as a unique devised movement and spoken word performance created by dancer and choreographer Susie DeSanto in conjunction with the Fort Lewis College Performing Arts students. So it promises to delve into the profoundness, respect, awe, and fear found within silence as a means to connect us with our true feelings and selves.
I read that description also, and it really struck me because I think the idea of silence is something that we rarely encounter in our lives, unless we're like maybe sleeping or something. Because when you think about, back in the old days before phones and all these other things, you probably experienced a lot of silence, which is why a lot of people, played instruments and things like that. But I kind of experienced after the election last week where I kind of just kind of cut myself off from a lot of the political podcasts I listened to and TV. And I just was just like, I just was kind of regrouping. And sometimes silence is a beautiful thing. So it's cool to hear that they're doing a kind of a show about it.
Did you find the silence to be a kind of reflective time for you? Was
Yeah.
it helpful?
Yeah, I think it was. It's kind of like if you're kind of like stuffed at the buffet, you need to step away and stop eating for a while because it was just too much. So, all right. Well, on a different note, my first headliner is, I love this, Clowns Giving. This is at Junkyard Social in Boulder, and it's on November 16th. It's an interactive and experimental avant clown comedy experience. So you just sit around a dining table for a fully immersive show in multiple acts that start in dinner preparation and ends in a multiple course yet fully inedible meal. So it says your whole clown family will be here, including your mom and dad and that one cousin you never really talked to, in the form of puppets, characters, and clowns. And they suggest don't come hungry because no real food will be served, though you can always get a drink and maybe a bag of chips there at the Junkyard Bar. So, and then afterwards, there's going to be a local punk band called Sleazy Milfs, I think. Sounds like a really fun event. And I was going to ask you, Toni, I haven't been to Junkyard Social. What is it like there?
No comment. I've actually never been to Junkyard Social myself either.
Okay.
I know it's like in my neck of the woods, but I've just never been to a show there.
Okay. Yeah, I was wondering if it's like, Punch Bowl Social where it's got bowling alleys and stuff, but I don't know. Maybe we'll have to check that out sometime next time we're in Boulder. It's such a great name.
Maybe I'm going to go to Clowns Giving. This sounds like a delight.
You should definitely go to Clowns Giving. So, all right, what's your next headliner, Toni?
Well, it's another event that's happening in Boulder, but it's very different. So it is Civic Love Stories with Undocumented Coloradans by Modus Theater. So this is happening at the Boulder Public Library on November 15th. And it features leaders with DACA, so that is the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, who are performing artfully crafted personal stories about their lives, along with a kind of a musical underscoring that ties all of these different pieces together. And then after that, Colorado's most diverse improv troupe, the Modus Playback Theater, will then support the audience to kind of reflect on the experience of listening to those stories and reenact these reflections on the spot.
Okay, that sounds cool. My next headliner is our friend of the pod, Abby Applebose, who was on the podcast last week. Just to remind you that her cabaret show, She's Here All Evening, will be at the Aurora Fox November 15th and 16th. So she's presenting an evening with featuring stories and songs to kind of take you on a journey through her career and life as a singer. So I think that'll be a really neat event to get to at Aurora Fox.
Definitely. And if folks for some reason missed listening to her interview on the podcast last week, I would definitely recommend it. She not only breaks down what cabaret is, but kind of walks through her career and why she keeps returning to these cabaret experiences. It was a really fascinating conversation.
Yeah, and she had this really cool opportunity this past summer to go spend 2 weeks in a kind of cabaret intensive at the Eugene O'Neill Center in Connecticut. So she talks about that as well.
My next headliner is in Aurora, Colorado. It's over at the People's Building, and it's a remounting of The Old Man and the Old Moon that's going to be taking place from November 15th to the 26th. So this story is a musical that takes an old man on an imaginative seafaring epic encompassing apocalyptic storms, civil wars, creatures from the deep, and cantankerous ghosts, as well as the fiercest obstacle of all, Change. This show is produced by the Third Side Theater Company, which staged the show back in 2022 in Evergreen. And I actually attended the show for OnStage Colorado, and I wrote about the show at the time that it was a delightfully minimalistic musical. And I stand by that. It was a really kind of organically created piece. It's a very small cast, but it's very ensemble driven, and I can't recommend it enough. I'll be really curious to see what it looks like over in the People's Building space, because it's a very different stage than where they were at before, which was at Center Stage in Evergreen.
Right. Yeah, it's such a cool sounding show, and I'm looking forward to. I'm going to see it this Saturday, so looking forward to checking that out.
Oh, awesome. I'm so glad to hear you're going to be seeing this one.
Yeah. My next headliner is way down south in Durango at the Durango Arts Center on November 16th. They're doing a 24-hour theater. So this is one of those kind of like the immersive thing you were just talking about, where they kind of mix stuff up on the spot. So here, writers will receive prompts, suggestions of set, characters, and dialogue on Friday evening, and then by Saturday evening they will have turned those prompts into scripts, cast, rehearsed, and ready to be performed on stage. So I think if you're in the Durango area, you should definitely check that out. That sounds really fun.
Yeah, it's always cool to see what people can come up with in like a very limited time period. It's truly of the moment in the best ways possible.
Deadlines can be the best muse sometimes.
Absolutely. That's as a writer myself, I can definitely attest to that. Sometimes nothing like a deadline to kick you in the ass and get you writing.
Yep.
So my next headliner is the 25th annual Putnam County Spelling Bee over at the Spark in Boulder. So this is a remount for them. They've done this show before, but it's very popular for them, and so they're bringing it back November 15th through the 22nd. And just for anybody who has not seen this show or is unfamiliar, it's a musical about these 6 prepubescent kids who are vying for a spelling bee championship of a lifetime. They've all got these really quirky personalities. It's very silly musical, lots of improv, and so if you're in the Boulder area and you want a bit of a romp, I'd recommend this one.
Okay, cool. My next headliner is just a one-night opportunity to see Raised on Ronstadt. This is a local theater production that was created by a friend of the pod, Jerry Henshaw, and it was done last spring. Really, really great show with a lot of different elements on it, but that are kind of focused on her love of Linda Ronstadt. And this will be at E-Town, where it was staged originally in Boulder, which is a great venue. So if you do have a chance on the 17th, which will be Sunday, go check that out.
I co-sign this very strongly. I remember seeing the original production when it was done in 2022 over in E-Town, and it's Jerry's life story kind of interspersed with how Linda Ronstadt has kind of influenced her and helped her through some of her most difficult moments in life. And it's just a really beautifully touching personal piece. My final headliner for this week is a film festival. So I know the Denver Film Festival has ended, but that doesn't mean you can't get your film on in another capacity. So the 2024 Wild and Scenic Film Festival in Denver is going to be happening at the Bug Theater for one night only on November 19th. And this is being produced by Rocky Mountain Wild. And it's a film festival described as being made by activists for activists. So you can all of these films are kind of geared around different ways that you can help save the planet. They all have direct actions that are explicitly linked to them. They have a community action page on the Rocky Mountain Wild website where you can go to kind of learn what you can actually do to make a difference in your community. And if you, for some reason, cannot make it in person to the Bug Theater, they also have a live stream option available. So you can stream all of the films at home.
Okay, excellent. Films about climate. That's good. All right, my last headliner is, so usually we just kind of focus on the week or so ahead, but I'm doing this one a little bit early like I did for the last one because their shows tend to sell out So this is at Wonderbound in Denver, and they're doing a show called Jolly Moxie. So tickets are definitely going fast. So this is, I think, it sounds like it's got a little bit of a Christmas theme. And this one's interesting because they're doing it with the Colorado Jazz Repertory Orchestra. So it's going to have a lot of beloved tunes from the 20s through the 50s, or 1920s through the 1950s, to jazz up your holidays. And so it says it's a madcap adventure of live music and dance with a devious dame on the grift and a stand-up guy caught in her web. So that sounds very Wonderboundy.
Indeed, yeah. And a little bit different than maybe what they've done for some of their more recent holiday shows, which have been a little bit more of vignettes that are kind of set to holiday music rather than a story. So that's it. That'll be cool to see. All right. Well, that is it for this week's headliners. We've got new and upcoming reviews on the website that you can check out. So head over there to OnStageColorado.com to read all of our most recent reviews and news from around the state. But now, let's hear Alex's interview with Kate Hertz from the Springs Ensemble Theatre.
All right, hey, we're here with Kate Hertz with Springs Ensemble Theatre Company. Thanks so much for being on the OnStage Colorado podcast today, Kate.
Yeah, Alex, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I wanted to talk to you because you've got a kind of a seasonally, thematically appropriate show coming up that you're directing, the Thanksgiving play by Larissa Fasthorse. It's going to be running at set November 7th through the 24th. So just a quick intro. So it's about a group of white theater artists trying to create a sensitive Thanksgiving pageant for Native American Heritage Month. And of course, it being a comedy, this all goes horribly awry.
Of course.
Yeah. So we'll talk about Thanksgiving play in just a little bit, but because I think you're on the board of directors there. I'm
on the marketing team at SET, and I do work very closely with our board members, and I've been a member for about 3 years now, so I can answer those questions.
So I want to ask, like, what was what's your theater path? Where'd you come from? Have you been in the Springs for a while, or are you new?
Sure. Yeah, I've been in the Springs my whole life, or for the most part. I did theater in high school, but I didn't see it as something I would be able to do afterwards. But then I went to school, and when I went to Pikes Peak State College, I just happened to take a playwriting class as one of my sort of extra credits. And Sarah Shaver, who is the department chair of theater over at Pikes Peak State College, for one thing, she helped me find a passion in playwriting in general, but introduced me to the theater scene, and she's a founding member of SET. So she had me audition for a SET show. I did it, and I just have not left. And so I've since then, and that was a little over 3 years ago now, have volunteered and participated in the theater community all over the Springs and a little bit outside of it since then. So
great.
It's been fun from there.
Yeah. So, and are you still writing plays yourself?
Yes, I am. My first full-length play actually went up at Springs Ensemble Theatre a couple years ago. Toni Tresca actually came to see it and wrote up on it. I've met them before, but it was called Holly Jolly Holy Shit. I don't know if you'll have to censor that or not, but
no, not at all. I do remember. I think we had the review on the site.
Yeah. So a few of my pieces that I've written have gone up at SET, but also at Pikes Peak State College, and a few other local companies, as well as outside of Colorado as well.
That's so great. I always love hearing stories about like that chance encounter, like, oh, maybe I'll try this class. For me, it was like I took a journalism class in high school. It's kind of on a whim, and here I am.
Sure, yeah, it's the best. Just finding that thing, and now my life revolves around it.
Yeah,
all these years later.
And sometimes it's that person that says, "Hey, you're not bad at this." So
yeah.
So Springs Ensemble Theatre Company is, I'd say, a pretty daring theater company. You guys,
we try to be, yeah.
Yeah, you've definitely done some. I haven't been down in a little while because I've got 2 reviewers in the Springs now, which is great. But
awesome.
But I've definitely seen some pretty off the wall stuff there in the past. And so it's kind of one of those fun theaters that you go to and you're never sure what you're going to run into.
Sure, that is always our hope, is to, no matter what your expectations are, we will subvert them.
Yeah. And so I think you guys are kind of in a newer facility in the last year or something like that?
Yes. Last summer, I think we moved from, we had our old space, which was its own building, a little outside of our downtown area here in the Springs. That's where we lived for, our first 13 years of being Springs Ensemble Theater. And then due to several issues, it was money, it was the change in ownership of the building, we had to move, but things lined up really nicely because we had recently had a new member. His name's Adam, and he owns the 59er Speakeasy in Old Colorado City, which is a historical district a little bit outside of our downtown. And the Speakeasy is so awesome. And again, we had just kind of started working with Adam, and we struck up a deal. And now we do shows in the Speakeasy, which is just a ton of fun because it's a super cool space, and also refreshments during a show. What a concept. It's a ton of fun.
All right. Well, that sounds great. Yeah, I remember the old place. It wasn't that bad, but it was
Oh
definitely.
no, it was a great space, and we were able to do so much with it. But it was time to move on, and we moved on to a place I'm pretty happy with. So
yeah, that sounds great. So when SET is coming up with its season, what are some of the goals or the mission that kind of come to the front when you're saying like, well, should we do this? Should we do that?
Sure. Great question. So our process for picking a season, we don't have like our board president or an artistic director pick it all out. All of our members are eligible to pitch a script. And when they do so, they include like the typical stuff of, what's the cast like? What are the technical needs? What role is this person who's pitching going to have to play in it? Whether that's directing or acting or what have you. But there's also a why should SET do this show section of the pitch form. And if this show isn't asking hard questions or challenging the audience in some way or responding to a sort of problem in whether that's in our local community or a problem that we're facing generally as people, if it's not doing that, it's probably not a SET show, right? So that's kind of our guiding principle of, does this feel like a SET show? In that, is it going to challenge people in some way? Is it going to be good theater? Can we do it well because even though we're in a new space, it's still quite small, right? So is this a big story that we can do in this small space?
Right. So yeah, I mean, on your mission statement, it says, you want to tell diverse stories and explore the problems and choices central to the human condition. So
yes,
sounds a little bit like Curious Theater here in Denver, and I think there's definitely a little bit of similarity there. In fact, they did the Thanksgiving play. I saw it a few years back. I think they did the regional premiere.
I think in 2019, because I wasn't the one who pitched this show for the season, but I was looking around to see recent productions, nearby productions, if we've done it here in the Springs yet, which to my knowledge we haven't, which is exciting. But yeah, I saw that Curious Company did it, and I wish I had gone out to see it, but I wasn't ingrained in the theater community quite yet.
Yeah, I remember they went all in on their set. They had this this big wall of like little doors that was like, I think in my review I compared it to like the old Hollywood Square shows.
Fun.
Something. And so what is the set looking like for your production?
Oh yeah, so Matt Phillips is my scenic designer. He's super talented. We're going for kind of just a older, classic-looking schoolhouse kind of feel. We've got this great linoleum floor we just finished up that we're very proud of. But yeah, and we're sourcing a bunch of theater posters from the community to hang up in the classroom that the show is set in. And the more inappropriate for high school that the show is, the more likely we're going to be hanging it up. We have our big poster hang final dressing the set day here coming up in a couple days. But yeah, we're hoping it just looks fun and creative and messy, like our theater classrooms that we all nostalgically look on back in high school, middle school, just capturing that feeling.
Yeah, for sure. So, what drew? I don't know who actually picked it or.
Sure, it was actually so Sarah Shaver, the professor who got me into the theater community in general. She originally pitched the show, and with our pitching process, again, you can choose what role you're going to play in this production. You could be a designer who just really wants to design for it or whatever. And Sarah pitched it because she thought SET should do this show. It's right up our alley. It's a great script, but as she is a theater professor, she has her show going on right now. Pikes Peak State College is putting on the 25th annual Putnam County Spelling Bee, opening the same night as us. So she's not able to play, a heavy part like directing or whatever. She's one of my producers, but she asked me to direct because she thought that the script would resonate with me, which it totally did, and that this would be a great first-time directing opportunity because this is my first time directing. So.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah. So how have you found that experience to be so far?
Oh my gosh, it's been such a blast. I landed such an excellent cast and we're having a lot of fun, and I'm trying to make it very collaborative, kind of like how it is in the actual show. We're all finding all these laughs and funny moments together, trying to just be silly and loose and trust each other. I think we've had a ton of fun, and I'm already so happy with where it is.
Great. So so the rehearsals are going well. And so what do you think about the Thanksgiving play? So this tells a side of the American story, kind of a little bit about not just the story, but who gets to tell it, I think is
right.
One of the main things. And how do you think comedy helps tell this side of that story?
Oh, it is so necessary, I feel. And Larissa Fasthorse, it would have absolutely been her right if she were to approach this subject and this story with a lot more, weight and making it feel like darker and heavier, because it is a dark and heavy and devastating topic when you go deep into it.
Right.
But these characters who are clueless, even though their intentions are good, who are totally biffing this whole thing, when we are laughing at them and how absurd their behavior is, we are also laughing at ourselves. And that feels like a kind of a more approachable way of this is behavior that I've exhibited that I should probably examine, right? It's a great way to get people to start having these conversations and having these thoughts and reckonings with themselves without it being so scary that people shut down, right? Or think oh, I'm being attacked, or oh, I'm not a bad person who's racist, so this doesn't apply to me. Just I think being able to laugh at ourselves when we mess up, because my camera is off, you can't see me, but I'm a person of color. I'm not Native myself, but I mess things up. I have said outdated terms without realizing. I have never claimed to be a social justice expert. These characters are far from social justice experts, but when you are able to mess up and be gracious about it and listen to the people who are calling you in and laugh at yourself, because a lot of the times messing up, especially the way these characters do, there is humor in it, right? So not acting like it's the end of the world, not acting like your character is being called into question when people are just trying to get you to see the correct story and understand where you're going wrong. It is so crucial to this topic.
Right. And do you think so Larissa Fasthorse is a Native American? What do you think, how important is it that was written by a Native American as opposed to, someone else?
Absolutely critical, I would say, because there are some, you've seen it, I'm sure there are some moments in this show where I have been okay, geez, I'm going to try and make this as funny as possible. If the person who wrote this wasn't Native, I would feel absolutely terrible about this.
Right. There's a certain amount of license there.
Yeah, exactly. It is her place to joke about this and her place to satirize these, because, there's our main story of these theater artists, but then there's also these kind of in-between bits that are parodies in a way of real life teachers' lesson plans in the way that they've taught Thanksgiving, or the songs they've taught to their students. And those are, it's appalling. I don't know. I can't say it's shocking necessarily that real teachers would do and say this, because of course they have. We live in America. But those sections especially can be oh, geez. But if she is able to find the humor in it, despite being a part of this group that has been so heavily affected by this harmful narrative, then it's okay, I guess if she's finding the humor, we got to find the humor too, to do it justice, because that's her intention, and it's our job to go through with it. So
right. Yeah, so the premise of the play is that they're not creating this with kids. It's adults that are going to
Yes.
be performing this, and they bring in some sort of a ringer, or supposedly a ringer. Can you tell us about that character who
Oh, yes,
That's really
Alicia. Oh,
funny.
she's
Yeah,
a ton of fun. So Logan, our director character, she, as part of one of the many grants she has received to produce this show, is able to bring in a professional actor from Los Angeles, which is so exciting.
yes,
And she found Alicia, who, for the first maybe 20 minutes of the play, we are led to believe is a Native American actress who's kind of going to be our cultural consultant, compass and person will be asking, is this the right term for this? Should we say this like
right.
this? Would this be offensive? And we know immediately that something is off, but turns out
Yeah,
she is not Native. She is just a white person with brown hair who took a headshot as a Native American person so she could potentially get more roles over in Los Angeles, which is such a funny reveal.
right.
And I mean, even if, right, she was an actual Native person, hiring someone on as an actor, not hiring them on as like a designated cultural consultant and expecting them to kind of be that person to answer all the questions. I have kind of been put in that position myself at
Uh-huh.
certain jobs as being like the only person of color. And I just, even the concept itself was so funny to me. And Margaret Brophy, who is the actress in Alicia's role, is so hilarious. And yeah, it is a great aspect to the show that I've had a ton of fun with.
Uh-huh. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
she's a great character.
Hmm.
So, what are some of the other if you can refresh my memory,
Sure.
where does the a lot of the comedy come from? Is it them trying to figure out what the show is or how to perform it?
Sure. It's in a lot of things. I think a lot of the comedy throughout is just kind of from these larger than life characters who, when you operate, especially in art spaces, nonprofit spaces, you become very familiar with these kinds of people who are, usually typically white and have the best intentions in the world and are trying with all of their might to make inclusion the forefront of their everything, which is incredible, and that those are amazing intentions. But again, we should be able to laugh at ourselves, right?
Right.
Like I remember the first time I heard the term holding space, I was very confused, and that actually happens in the show as well. Alicia gets confused by these characters saying that they're holding space for her. Um, but I think a lot of the comedy comes from just like, oh gosh, I totally know this person, or oh gosh, I've totally been this person, being almost overly sensitive to some things in a funny way. But yeah, a lot of the comedy also comes from trying to make this show that is kind of impossible, because we have another character. His name's Caden. He is an elementary school history teacher. So he's kind of their historical consultant in a
Right.
way. And our director keeps asking, like, okay, where can we find like our traditional Thanksgiving where everyone sits down and is happy, right? And so he keeps going through history, and it's, settlers and native people interacted here, and I mean it was good in this way, but then there was violence and murder, or this happened but then there was also violence and murder, and just never finding that perfect Thanksgiving story that we all know and love to put it in a play because it doesn't exist. It's so funny. And then, after we discover that Alicia is in fact just a white person with brown hair, we now have to navigate this new problem of how do we tell this story for Native American Heritage Month without any Native American people, because they are at least smart enough to know that we're not going to have a white person play a Native person. So how can we do this with all white characters and all white actors?
Yeah.
That also lends itself to a ton of very funny situations that they find themselves in. There's humor all over this piece. Larissa Fast Horses, just her sense of humor is insane. It's so much fun.
Uh-huh. Yeah, it is kind of, there's a lot of humor in like white people tying themselves in knots trying to portray
Yeah.
any other kind of ethnic groups or anything
Sure.
like that. So a lot of comic potential there. So great. Well, Kate Hertz, director of the Thanksgiving play, will be at the Springs Ensemble Theatre Company on November 7th through 24th. So you're opening in just a week.
A week from yesterday. Yep, we've got our big teching tomorrow. Super excited. Not to over talk how happy I am with how we are in the process. I'm knocking on wood literally as we speak. You can't see me, but I am. But I'm so happy with how it's going along. I've got a great cast, great designers. It'll be such a fun show to watch. I can't wait for people to see it.
That's great. All right. Well, thanks again for coming on the OnStage Colorado podcast, Kate. And break legs
thank you,
all
Alex.
around.
All right. Well, that's it for this week's episode of the OnStage Colorado podcast. That was such a great conversation that you had with Kate. I'm so glad we were able to have her on.
Yeah, that's a neat theater. They definitely do some stuff where you're like kind of stagger out of there, not sure what you saw, and but others. But even it's kind of off the wall, they usually do a pretty good job. So next week on the podcast, I'm still kind of trying to, what's the word for it? Firm up the details. So next week on the podcast, I'm still firming up the details, but I'm hoping we're going to have Brian Landis-Folkens on here, maybe as a guest host, to talk about, he is sort of he's got one foot in the stage world and another foot in the screen world, so he's been spending time working on films and TV, and he's got some exciting things coming up. So he'll be a lot of fun to talk to. So looking forward to that. If it's not next week, it'll be the one after.
Yeah, I'm excited to have him on. I mean, who doesn't love BLF? He's such a great guy, super known around Colorado, and I'm really interested in diving in on how he balances life as both a professional stage actor as well as a full-time film actor as well.
He is also, he's one of those actors, when I see his name on a cast list, I'm like, I'm going to that. I love watching him on stage. He's so good.
Totally. So we've got lots of exciting stuff on the way. If you want to stay up to date on what's going on in theaters around the state, subscribe to the OnStage Colorado podcast wherever you get your audio stuff. And if you like what you're doing, sure. But if you like what we're doing, please give us a review wherever you're listening to this. Maybe 5 stars if you feel so inclined, but we will take what we can get. So thank you so much again for listening. And if you want to support the work that we're doing, please consider donating to support OnStage Colorado. There is a link under our resources page of our website.
Yeah, and also at the bottom of our newsletter that we send out. So this is the giving season. So of course, a lot of the nonprofits are jumping on the Colorado Gives Day train, which we can't participate in because we're not a nonprofit, but I definitely appreciate any help to support what we do here at OnStage Colorado. Also, I'll mention again that we have our big holiday calendar now up on the site. So if you just go to the calendar at the top, you'll see a link to it, and it's got all of the shows, all of the many nutcrackers and Christmas carols and whatever else floats your boat to see for the holiday season. So thanks so much for listening. I'm Alex Miller.
And I'm Toni Tresca, and we'll see you at the show.